So I'm talking to Paul Castronovo. Paul, welcome to the Legacy Project. I'm really excited to talk to you about this today.
Well, I guess when you get to be my age, all you got left is your legacy.
Yeah, you and me both, right?
Uh,
One of the things that really impressed me is when you reached out and said, "Hey, I got a story about how I rebuilt the show." You've got a long legacy of tremendous success, especially mostly with Paul and young Ron.
yeah.
That all changed, and your legacy changed, and you rebuilt your show. Tell me that story, because I've never heard what happened behind it.
Well, we went, it was the Paul and Young Ron show for 28 years. And that's a long run for a morning show. I thought we'd probably continue that show, but Ron decided to leave and step down. And that was in 2016. Now, like you said, tremendous success, unparalleled in Miami. It was just really very successful. We had an unbelievable run, and even at the end, we were sitting there, number one show. The last couple of books, it was just but I thought, ego wise, Paul and Young Ron, I could fart on the air, and I'm gonna get an 8 share. So we had our finale, our last show, and we did a big send off. I had invited all our celebrity friends, and we did it at the casino, at the Improv at the casino. And it's funny. I didn't know what to expect. You never do when you do a remote. But I pulled up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and there was a line, and the line was snaking around the building. And I thought, well, okay, we got something here. So it was one for the ages, and that was in December of 16. And then we were relaunching come after the first of the year with the new show. And we sort of started, I had some ideas about what I wanted to do. And they were all like, you got to have a woman on the show. We went all these years, never had a full-time, we'd had interns and sidekicks and such, and like rotating positions in and out. But it was always Paul and Young Ron. We were the base. So we brought in a woman, and we brought in another guy who I'd worked with in the past. He had done some web stuff for us, and I brought in a board op / producer guy. And so instead of Paul and Yaron, it was me and the woman and a sports guy and a producer guy. And it didn't work. I mean, I could go into the reasons why and everything else. A lot of it has to do with, I think sometimes and I've seen this in college football, when you replace a legend, and I'm not saying I'm a legend, but our show was legendary in South Florida.
Yeah.
And when you replace that, it sounds different.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily like it, whether they have given it a chance or not. It sounds different.
Different is always worse at first with listeners. Anything that's different, it disrupts their habit. It disrupts
Right.
It's not comfortable like I've grown up with for 28 years.
And I remember, the Facebook posts, and this isn't Paul and Ron. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not. Ron left, but I'm still there. And, there may have been some mistakes made. I don't think the company did us any favors by not marketing. I think they assumed, well, everyone will be there just to see. I think the way we did it was we did the big send off, Paul and Young Ron, and we played highlights of Ron over the holidays. And then the promos started running. The all new Paul Castronovo show, January 2nd. Don't miss it. Prepare for disappointment. Well, they got it. That was our tongue-in-cheek bit, And so a few months went by, and I felt there was no chemistry. There wasn't a lot of chemistry between some of us. And she was younger and didn't get some of my stuff, and I was probably not ready for what was transpiring. And I remember going to management and saying, guys, they hate the show. Look at the Facebook. Look what they're saying online. Look at the Twitter. Oh, don't worry about that. We've seen it 100 times, but it kept getting worse. And when the Facebook posts turned into numbers dwindling, about a year into it, the program director and I were like, okay, what are we doing here? And I think they all agreed, okay, we got issues. So we punted, and we cleaned house effectively, and we brought back someone who had been a part of my show for many, many years. And And also we brought in a gal that had been doing some sidekick stuff for us whenever Ron was out and filling in for the news, who I had told earlier, Heather, she's now part of my team. I told her that she, if you stuck with me, you were going to be a radio star. And because I knew she had produced Kevin in Virginia many years earlier. So I knew she had the chops. And I said, you could be a sidekick news person and you can make a ton of money. And she was like, I'm a behind the scenes person. But I knew that the audience liked her, by the way, and bringing Toast back was a great move because there was a comfort level. So
Yeah.
and I needed that comfort level as well.
Yeah.
So then we didn't have a producer. We hired a producer, and for me, this guy Mike Anderson, we got him from 98 Rock in Baltimore. Got very lucky in that I found a producer that has the perfect temperament for me. Morning radio could be very frenetic and insane, and we got 30 seconds. The guest isn't here. People get crazy. He's so mellow and so relaxed, just odd enough though, and different, and younger than me, that he brings a different sensibility. So I have all that being said, we went from 1st to 16th. I was like, and now we're back. We have the new show, and I think unfortunately, Toast was a casualty during the pandemic. So, I think the company, we lost 1,200 people. He was one of them. But we are now down to the nucleus of myself, Heather Nelson, who does news and women's perspective, and then Mike Anderson, producer sidekick. And I really think we have a little family, and it's fun. And Heather has no fear of me, which some could. I mean, I'm like a bull in a china shop sometimes. But she's a tough broad from Boston who is into sports and not afraid and sarcastic and funny. And it's classic rock. Also, they're both late 30s and I'm not. And so it also keeps me, they'll happily point out when I'm being the okay boomer guy, which is great. It really
adds dimension. It adds a lot of dimension to character. Yeah,
it really has. And they're both single, so that helps me. I'm a married guy and family guy, so we have the other element. So it was a real eye opener. Honest to God, I really thought that I was looking at it going, well, this is the end of my career. It's over. And I'm like, I can't go out this way. And I really didn't want to. And thankfully, the company was 100% behind me.
So this was like 2017, 2018 when it was starting to rebuild then. So how long did it take until you said, we got something here, this is going in the right direction, we're starting to get traction, this feels good?
When it really hit, and I think you saw this, a lot of heritage shows did very well during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think people, I don't know why, but they reached out to me and they felt like, okay, Paul's just as nervous as we are. Paul is going to get us through this. And I did a bunch of stuff on the air that I thought was, very, very helpful. We did many shows with just talking to local businesses that were open and selling stuff. Yeah. And we would just give people free commercials. We really became this community show. And I think that was, the pandemic really helped launch our little crew. We'd had it for a year. We were doing fine. But I think that was the, and the other part of it is I've been doing my show remotely. I have a house in Maine, and I've been doing my show from Maine every summer for a decade. So when everybody was working remotely, we'd already had it down. Yeah. So there was no awkwardness, no uncomfortableness. It was just a natural thing for us. So a lot of those things, sort of played into it. But I really believe that at the beginning of the pandemic, they felt like, okay, we're going to be okay. Paul's going to get us through this. I know that sounds crazy, but that's how I feel.
You're a friend. You're a friend that they trust. So you put the team back together, and it sounds like as you were putting those pieces in place, a lot of the ingredients that made that work were you were comfortable with the team that you put together and trust, yep. Right? Comfort and trust.
That's why, using the analogy of a football coach, coach comes into town. Who does he bring with him? He brings in what he knows. He brings yep. his assistants in. And there's something to be said about that. And I need someone in my corner that I know that it's a weird thing. And I've had 23 or 24 program directors in my career. And there's a learning curve. And PD comes in and he doesn't know me, I don't know him, and it takes us a year to figure each other out. You don't have that kind of luxury when you're on a radio show to figure each other out. They don't nowadays. We don't get that kind of time.
Yeah, you got a couple of quarters. Let's see some traction. How are the numbers?
Yeah.
And
So,
and hope that those meters fall into the right hands.
Because, believe me, I live and die by the stupid things, and we all do.
Hey, tell me, when you were doing the young Ron send off, and you saw that line of people that were queued to say goodbye and to wish him well, what did you feel at that moment when you came around that corner and saw those people that were there for you?
Well, Tracy, I've had this anxiety every time I do a gig.
Yeah.
Well, I've thrown some big parties in Fort Lauderdale and Miami over the years when, we build this thing up and then we're like, all right, it's Friday night, we'll see you there. And then, that drive there, is anyone going to be there? And I've had some great successes. I've had thousands of people taking over the streets. I've also shown up and had 12 people and a cup of coffee.
And you never know.
You never know. And I'm sure every other radio personality has been in that same boat.
Yeah.
When I showed up at the gig, I think it was 5 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I went to the parking garage and I got my briefcase out and Ron pulled up next to me and I'm like, well, here we go. I wonder how it's going to be. And we went down the escalator or elevator and got out and there was a huge crowd of people in a line. It was the greatest thing. I felt like, oh man, it's going to be great. And one by one, they all started. Just comedian Bert Kreischer showed up, and then I had the Miami-based movie stars. Stephen Bauer showed up. Dan Marino came. It was unbelievable. The people that were coming out of the woodwork and old cast members, and it was really rewarding. And and I thought, well, good. This will be a great send off, and he's happy, and I'm happy, and I'll have a new show, and it'll be exciting for me because 28 years is a long run, and it was also the thought of doing something different that kind of reinvigorated me. That was it.
That's awesome, and then it also demonstrates the impact that radio personalities have. Sitting in a studio, talking to yourselves for 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day, and the impact that has. A lot of times you don't know it, you can't see it, you can feel it, but it's not tangible. So
I'm just wondering
how you.
I just wondered if I blew my wad with my finale for Ron, because if I ever retire, how am I going to top that show?
You'll top that, believe me. But talk about the way that personalities in your show in particular, but how personalities can change listeners' lives and the impact that you can have.
Well, every day I'll talk to somebody, and I've got a couple of those. Like the writer Brad Meltzer. To this day, he's one of my best buddies. But when he was a kid, I saw a blurb in the paper saying local author releases first book. And I'm like, maybe we should have this guy in. And he's a young kid, he's in his 20s and he's written a book. And why don't we have him on? So I remember he came in and he showed up with his entire family. And to this day, he's on my show all the time. And we always talk about, to him, it was the greatest thing ever to have his first interview on the radio, on the show that his whole family listened to. It became his parents have passed away since then. And we're family friends. So that impact is wonderful. And also, when my wife went through breast cancer many years ago, and for a while we kept it to ourselves because it was very stressful. I was missing a lot of work. And when she finally gave me the go ahead to open up on the air, it was a very powerful moment. And we're a comedy show. It was so different for everything we've ever done. The reason I'm bringing that up is because I can't begin to tell you how many hundreds of letters I got. And this is back when people sent letters, by the way, from people saying, boy, if it could happen to you, I got my mom, my sister, my test. It really amazing. And we saved lives. And my wife, I credit her for that one. So yeah, there's so many different ways that we touch people that you don't have any idea.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to young personalities coming up that are trying to find their way and to try to figure out who they are, what their voice is, and how they're building their legacy today in an entirely different media world that exists today that was very different when you were growing your roots? How can
Well,
they navigate through this? How can they build
that's
their
a,
voice?
a difficult question. If you could give me any advice, I'll tell you that early in my career, I thought I knew everything, and I butted heads with a lot of different programming people, a lot of different, I felt like I knew everything. And as I've gotten wiser and older, I've listened. I listen a lot more, and I take advice, and I think that you should be willing to bend. Yeah, and I think you have to be, or else you're not going to have a job. And I did a talk show for the last 25 years, and we switched it up, and now we've added a few songs. And at first I was like, what the hell? I'm not a DJ. I'm a talk show host. Well, it has helped. And by the way, it's made my job easier. When you're just doing talk, you really don't have a lot of time. The only time you have to gather your thoughts and to get ready for the next segment is during the commercial set. And it could be 2 minutes, 3 minutes. When you play a song, I can regroup completely, reset everything. And so I'm learning. So be willing to learn. You don't know everything. And I'll go back to the beginning. Find the market that you need. Don't move around every 2 years. Find that market you want to be in and marry it. I think that's the most important thing. And I did that early in my career. And the first thing I did was, when I got to Miami, was I did every single event I was asked to host. Charity events, bar gigs. It's not like it used to be. Bar gigs aren't nearly as prevalent, but there's always somebody looking at you to host a charity event.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to pay you, but here's how it'll pay off. Because the people that run these charity events are the people that buy commercials. And if you're friendly with that community, which I have become very friendly with the advertising community over the years. I mean, I must do 17, 18 endorsements. So, I mean, if I do a charity event and I befriend the person's wife who spearheaded it and happens to be a car dealer, guess what? I'm now sitting at the table with that car dealer, and we're drinking champagne, and I'm hosting the event, and I'm making them laugh, and now I'm endorsing their product. And that has happened so many times over the years.
Yeah, go make friends, in other words.
Well, yeah, make yourself accessible. Be out there. I give this. There's a young lady that does middays on our station, and I'm so impressed with her, Amelia. She's from Australia, and she has really, really embraced that, and really is marrying the market. I've seen a lot of personalities come and go in this town. I've watched what she's done, and I've said to myself, I said it to somebody the other day, I said, she's doing it the right way. If you want to work here forever, get to know everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. Paul, thank you so much. This is awesome. Thanks for sharing your story and your legacy.